Hello everyone, welcome to this really important event for the Digital Good Network. Our question for today is, what is the digital good? And we're delighted to have some amazing speakers here to think about and reflect on this. As we can see, the Digital Good Network relates to building a research community focused on what a good digital society should look like and how we get there. And my colleagues will share a little bit more about this in due course. We'd be really interested to learn more about which disciplines you're all from. So please feel free to drop your name in the chat and just say a little bit about your discipline. It would be really interesting to hear from you as well throughout this process. And of course, this isn't a particularly scientific approach, but it's always good to know who's joining this conversation. And we'll aim to make this as engaging and interactive as possible. So I am Rima Patel. I'm Policy and Public Engagement Lead for the network. And before I introduce today's guest, I wanted to let you know that we are professionally live captioning this event. And if you would like captioning, you can select captions using the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. So the best way to do this is to press CC, and that should allow you to see the live caption. And I wanted to say thank you to Kelly and my ClearText for providing the caption today. And just by way of sort of ensuring visual accessibility, I should also visually introduce myself. So I'm Rima. I'm currently wearing a jacket, the maroonish jacket, a top, black top. I have brown skin, brown hair, and green eyes. And yeah, so that's me in terms of me visually. And just, you know, a few things by way of points of housekeeping. So firstly, the event will be recorded by Zoom. It will be available on our website shortly after the event. The panelists here today will speak for about 8 minutes each, and we will have time for questions through the Q&A. So we will open up the discussion and take questions from the audience. We will be taking those through the Q&A function on Zoom. I've just spotted that there's some issues with the chat functionality. Sorry about that. We will do our best to rectify that ASAP so you can share a little bit more about your disciplinary background. And also, I wanted to say that we are on Mastodon, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and that's at Digital Good Net, using the hashtag Digital Good. So I'm really pleased to be joined today by 3 phenomenal people. You know, they've done a huge amount to get this network off the ground. They are Helen Kennedy, Gina Neff, and Rod William. And I'll briefly introduce them. So Helen Kennedy is Director of the Digital Good Network and Professor of Digital Society at the University of Sheffield. Rod Williams is Associate Director and Equity Challenge Leader for the network, and is Senior Lecturer in Digital Media and Society at the University of Sheffield. And Gina Neff is Associate Director and Equity Challenge Leader for the network, and is Executive Director of the Mindry Centre for Technology and Democracy at the University of Cambridge. So I will ensure that each individual says more about their work and their focus on the digital good. First person up to speak is Helen Kennedy. So Helen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rima. Can we quickly zoom to the second slide, and then we'll take that slide down in a minute, and you will see us. So hello, everybody. It's great that there are so many people here. I'm really excited to publicly launch the ESRC Digital Good Network today. I'm Helen Kennedy. I'm a white woman in the later stages of my career, wearing some big round varifocal glasses that mean that I tilt my head in a weird angle at times, if you're wondering why I'm doing that. And as Rima says, I am the director of the Digital Good Network. I have been researching people's engagements with digital developments for more than 20 years and thinking about the ways that practitioners can build on knowledge about experiences of the digital in ways that overcome inequity. And I've done that across a bunch of different projects. And I think a lot of my interests kind of really gel here in the ESRC Digital Good Network. So I'm going to start and say a bit about the network, and then we're going to each talk about the 3 themes that are at the center of the network, and I'll wrap up at the end with a little bit of information about our opportunities, and then we'll hand over to for a Q&A, which Rima will coordinate for us. So we all must think that digital technologies are important. That's why we're here. But do they help us lead good lives? Even the best intentioned digital technologies, do they help us lead good lives? So if you think about well-intentioned technologies like dating apps, for example, they enable romantic connections, but they're also used to harass and can be detrimental to mental health. Social media platforms moderate content to limit self-harm, but they also deny users access to communities of well-being support in the process. Automation and AI intend to benefit society, to make institutions efficient, but they can also discriminate. We think about the famous A-level results fiasco in 2020 here in the UK. And all of these digital technologies have both positive and negative effects on the planet. So the fact is that digital technologies are not always good for people and societies. And in this context, we think it is really important to address the question of what is a good digital society. Can we drop the slides, by the way, folks? Sorry, I should have said that at the beginning. Thank you. Yeah, what is a good digital society and how do we get there? How do we get to a good digital society? And that is the question that is at the heart of the ESRC Digital Good Network. It's really important to flag it's a network. We're building a network. We want the people here listening today to come into the network, to be part of the network, by participating in events and taking advantage of other opportunities that we have on offer. We're building an interdisciplinary network because we believe this question of what does a good digital society look like can't be answered from the perspective of one discipline alone. And we will enable the development of research capacity and skills and expertise through our 5-year duration and our network building activities. So more about opportunities a bit later on today and the rest of this week. For now, I'm going to roll back to this question of what does a good digital society look like? That is such a deceptively simple question, isn't it? It looks like a really simple question. But anybody that has considered any of these questions will know that it is incredibly complex. On the one hand, we have loads of digital for social good initiatives. We have data for good initiatives. We even have drones for good initiatives. And policy always emphasizes ensuring that digital technologies are deployed for good societal outcomes. If we think about the national data strategy, it emphasizes responsible, fair and ethical data uses. The national AI strategy emphasizes protecting publics and values. The online safety bill aims to minimize harms. And yet, good outcomes are not guaranteed. I talked about dating apps, I talked about social media platforms, I talked about the A-level result algorithm. So we have all this going on, this sort of desire, this policy for social good and the good not being achieved. And when we think about research into this area, We add another kind of level of kind of contradictory conceptualization of what the good is, how we should go about approaching the good. So we think about philosophical traditions, about the conditions that enable people to lead good lives, all of the work in computing and design ethics research, looking at what should and should not be built. So these are always kind of normative questions. We think about some approaches like critical or political economy approaches, looking at the role of states and powerful actors, actually shunning the concept of the good and preferring instead to conceive of these issues in terms of justice or rights, for example. And a lot of writers in recent years highlighting or unveiling the unequal experiences that people have of digital technologies because of structural societal inequalities and the way those inequalities and inequities kind of feed into us not achieving the digital good, all of which is really important. But the question remains, what do we want to replace that with? What kind of digital society do we want to live in? There's been a lot of focus on digital harms, and that is quite right. We needed them to become more visible to us. But I note that US critical race scholar Rua Benjamin says, remember to imagine and craft the world you cannot live without, just as you dismantle the ones you cannot live within. And we take this as a kind of clarion call that we're responding to in the network, which, as I said, aims to be interdisciplinary, led by social scientists. We three are social scientists, but also bringing in and working with and collaborating with all of the disciplines that have a stake in this question of what a good digital society looks like. We structure our research around 3 challenges. We think addressing these challenges is essential to answering the question of what does a good digital society look like. They are equity, sustainability, and resilience. And this gives me a perfect opportunity to hand over to my colleague, Ros Williams, who will pick up and talk about that first challenge.
Thanks very much, Helen. Hi, everybody. My name's Ros Williams, and I'm a senior lecturer in digital media and society in the School of Sociological Studies at the University of Sheffield. I've got light skin, mixed race woman, got quite a lot of freckles you might be able to see, and I've got brown hair that's tied back, got spectacles that sort of, like Helen, leads me to gesturing in strange ways on a screen. And I'm wearing I think you can see a green top, just so you know what you're looking at. My pronouns are they, them, / she, her, and thanks all of you for being here. So I'm an associate director of the network. I'm also what we're calling the equity challenge leader in this network as well. And that's because of the interest in my own work, particularly around racialized inequities, generally in the context of health, but in other areas as well. And that's sort of what brings me here, this intersection between technology, race, and health. And that's an exciting opportunity to be part of this network to help to elaborate a really important research agenda for our community. So equity, as Helen said, is one of the Digital Good Network's guiding societal challenges. And this isn't least because decades of structural inequality have created an urgent need for greater social equity. And in this context, technology, and digital technologies in particular, are an important site for how these inequities play out. And we use the term equity deliberately to acknowledge the need for situated analyses of how different individuals and groups have digital relationships and of the related and multiple configurations of the digital good. So put simply, whilst one person might derive benefit from a given digital technology, others might be actively harmed by it or indeed excluded from it altogether. And this contention comes out of a really long, very interdisciplinary tradition of thinking about how different people engage with technologies. So I often think about Langdon Winner's really famous example of the New York overpasses. It's a very well-used case in my discipline, which is science and technology studies, of how interests, values, and through these inequalities get baked into the material environment. How, in his words, artifacts have politics. And no doubt other disciplines, many of whom we've got here today, it's exciting to see so many disciplines represented here. No doubt you all draw on your own canonical examples in thinking this through, but it's really useful, I think, to rehearse Winner's point here very briefly. So the New York City bridges or overpasses that he considered were, he argued, quote, deliberately designed to achieve a particular social effect, end quote. Specifically, the public transport buses carrying those who could not afford a car, many of whom were Black, could not fit beneath the overpasses, excluding them from Long Island's leisure spaces. Now, Winner's point here is that the bridges were not neutral, but designed, purposefully or not, to produce specific consequences through their use. So with equity as one of the key societal challenges that motivates us, the Digital Good Network maintains that, like any technology, digital technologies have the capacity to mediate, sustain, and challenge inequity too. Recent, more familiar examples include social movements like Black Lives Matter or Me Too, where hashtag prefixes connect people across digital networks. And in my own work, digital tissue donor recruitment initiatives used during COVID exclude racially minoritized communities, many of whom require ongoing in-person engagement, not a one-off visit to a website, to participate in a donation system that inspires very little trust for them. Alongside race, ethnicity, and gender, age, geography, language, socioeconomic status, and different abilities and their intersections are linked to very uneven technological uses, literacies, and vulnerabilities, sometimes resulting in digital exclusions. As our emerging methodologies coordinator for the network, Scott Hale from the Oxford Internet Institute explores in his work, and in separate work with the Living with Data team, Helen Kennedy, our director, has explored this too. Now, we might think of notable recent scholarship like Sophia Noble's Algorithms of Oppression, How Research Engines Reinforce Racism, which is a great title for a book, or another book with an equally fantastic title, Race After Technology, Abolitionist Tools for the New Jim Code by Rua Benjamin, who Helen mentioned earlier. Now, these pieces of work exemplify how the social location of race in particular has become a really visible fulcrum around which a lot of these debates are turning. Elsewhere, though, the designer and researcher Sasha Constanza Chock offers a very different take. They describe moving up the queue to the airport security gate. We can all sort of imagine that, I think, in our own history, is more recent than not. When they arrive for their turn to pass through, the staff member selects female from the two options on the software's user interface. And as Constanza Chock stands in front of the body scanner with their arms out, the measurements of their body, which is a trans, non-binary body, do not fall within the algorithmic bounds of the standard height, breadth, and width measurements of a quote-unquote women's body. And they're flagged as an anomaly, leading to a long, uncomfortable, and embarrassing interaction with the security staff. So for some, the airport security gate and its software is a relatively neutral component of taking a flight that we don't really give much thought to. For others, it can feel actively violent. So the large body of work on digital technologies and equity that I'm drawing on in these examples, I think, a really useful backdrop against which to mention what's a very important adage in science and technology studies. That is, it could have been otherwise. A constellation of interests, values, resources, and standards conspire to create technologies, and the constellation of changed values and interests consequently leads to different technology. It could have been otherwise, but we don't just have to operate in the past tense conditional. We could move to the present conditional. It could yet be otherwise. This, we believe, requires the kind of research activity that the Digital Good Network wants to support. Activity that is, at least in part, future focused. It's not only about mapping out the damages, the harms and dangers of digital technologies, but their emancipatory possibilities and potentials too. Acknowledging that digital technologies could yet be otherwise, and doing the interdisciplinary work of trying both to imagine and ultimately to create that otherwise. So our funding distribution activity, like the Digital Good Research Fund, will invite people to articulate how their proposed activities will centre a focus on the network's societal challenges, including equity. So we want to encourage applications that centre this concern for equity in relation to all kinds of questions of the digital. We're also committed to ensuring the expansion of representation from currently underrepresented groups in interdisciplinary digital society research. And we mean this across a diversity of social locations, including but not limited to gender identity, sexuality, racial and ethnic identity, and disability. So digital relationships take place in conditions of power asymmetry and structural inequity that are readily made more visible by ensuring that those of us doing the research come from a range of social locations ourselves. That's our contention. And this is why in our funding distribution activity, we want especially to encourage diverse teams of applicants across both disciplines and social locations. So I think I've run out of time, so I'm going to pass over to Gina next, I think. Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Roz, Rima, and Helen, and thanks to all of you for being here with us today. I'm very excited that we are here together. I'm Gina Knapp. I run the Menders Center for Technology and Democracy at Cambridge, and I'm the Sustainability Challenge Leader for the Digital Good Network, in addition to being the co-director, associate director. And what I'd like to do today, I just heard my audio isn't great. I'm going to do a couple of things to help improve that.
Gina, can I suggest that Helen comes in on the resilience theme whilst you're able to sort out your audio?
Yeah, shall I do that? Is that
Yes,
okay? Is
that
that
would be
okay,
great.
Gina? Okay. I'm going to say a lot less about the third theme, resilience, than you'll hear about the other two themes, and it'll become apparent why. So our third theme is resilience, because individual and collective well-being, wellness, coping, and recovery strategies in the face of things like pandemics, political conflicts, natural disasters, digital misinformation, online hate, and everyday life matter for our realization of the digital good. Digital technologies are increasingly central to these things, to well-being, mental health, and recovery, these things that we collectively refer to as resilience. Resilience influences and is influenced by social relationships, as our co-investigator and resilience challenge lead Abby Millings writes about, and Abby's going to talk about her take on the digital good at the event tomorrow. And digital innovations seek to provide support and infrastructure for well-being, coping, recovery, and so on, and for collective humanitarian forms of crisis recovery. And resilience is shaped by the types of inequities that Roz was talking about. So it's vital, resilience is vital. But digital resilience initiatives need critical investigation, we say, because of the different and contradictory conceptualizations of the good that I talked about in the introduction, and the fact that these can lead to unexpected harms. So, to give an example from another co-investigator, Jonathan Ong from the University of Massachusetts, who will also talk about his take on the digital good tomorrow. He's looked at digital wellness initiatives online and found surprising connections with far-right ideologies and conspiracy theories. So looking at something ostensibly digitally good and seeing that actually that needs critical interrogation and needs unpacking. So these are the kind of range of issues that we refer to when we talk about resilience. And as I said, we'll hear Abby Millings and Jonathan Ong's take on this topic in the lunchtime talk tomorrow, which is why I'm saying a little bit less about it now, and hopefully can hand back to Gina with some tweaked audio.
How is this, everyone? I hope this is much better. Headphones, we've learned in the pandemic, do wonders. I am Gina. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to talk a little bit about our sustainability challenge. And to start with the visual description, I am a middle-aged white woman with headphones on, a headset, also wearing reading glasses so I can see the text that's streaming on the screen in front of me. I have platinum hair, silver, that's a fancy word for silver hair, and pale skin. It's really great to be here. I would like to start, if I may, by sharing my screen. I'm going to see if I can do this. Perfect. I'm going to share that one. And I'm going to do this. Done. Great. And then we'll do this as a slideshow. Fantastic. I've got this shared in part because I think it helps with those of you following along to hear and be able to read at the same time. So I'm going to make 4 points in my short time before I turn it back over to Helen and Rima. The first is, why have we anchored sustainability to the Digital Good Network? And the core intellectual reason for that is simply, we believe the digital good depends on it. As we define the digital good network and what we're doing, we talk about making technologies work for people, societies, and the planet. And if we don't bring these issues of sustainability centrally into the work we do, we may find ourselves in this position where our digital technology development is running apace, but our ability to manage it from a planetary point of view is challenged. So what are those sustainability challenges? Well, I don't have to stretch very far to find the examples of Bitcoin mining causing enormous environmental impact, of the minerals and extractive processes that are used to build the hardware in our digital environment, the impact on oceans of the undersea cable network, and the fragile oceanside communities subject to climate change who are bearing the brunt of both keeping the world's internet connected, but also while facing these enormous challenges of climate change. So there are sustainability challenges in many of the ways that we think about research about the digital. How are we defining sustainability? Well, in our sustainability policy, which we have developed, we target and amplify UKRI's mission. So UK Research and Innovation has a sustainability policy and strategy, and that is how we're thinking about how we define what sustainability is and how we define the activities that are within that scope. This sustainability strategy, both ours and the UKRI mission strategy, are both targeted to help in the UK government's overall policy of being net zero by 2050. So the government have made these commitments to sustainable climate changes, and we are building our policy around that. So what are we doing for sustainability? We've done 3 kinds of broad sweeps in this. We believe that in thinking about research on the digital and sustainability, that we can be supporting core research on the digital good. The second is how we procure what we do in terms of our research, in terms of what we do as a network, and in terms of what we do as a management team. So how are we making choices that are good for the future of the planet? And finally, we think about the network in terms of what we're doing for sustainability. One of the goals is to help researchers think about what we can be doing in our own work in our own organizations and institutions, and with the communities we work with in order to help bed in these ideas about sustainability. And so that's part of what we're trying to support and develop as well. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen share and I'm going to hand back over to Helen.
So I will just take 1 minute before we turn to the Q&A, if that's okay, to just flag 2 imminent opportunities through the network. We are going to talk a lot more about opportunities in the next 2 lunchtime events, which Rima will remind you of at the end. But preempting that a lot of the questions might be about the opportunities, I will just flag here that we are launching a call for people to apply for funds to the Digital Good Research Fund. We're launching it today. The application deadline is the 28th of April. There is a sand pit on the 27th of March. If you want to join, you need to get your expression of interest to us by the 14th of March. All of this information is online and it will be covered again over the next couple of events. And if we could forward to the next slide, please. We're also today inviting PhD researchers to apply to join us for a short summer school. This year it's a 2-day summer school. This year we'll run one every year. It will be longer in future, but we're starting off with a shorter one. It will be on the 22nd and 23rd of June. The deadline for applying is the 24th of March. All of the information is on our website. Hopefully some of our colleagues are putting the URL of the website in the chat at the moment. So definitely intending to say more about these opportunities in the future events, hoping we can have a conversation about what the digital good is for the remainder of this session. So can we close the slides, please?
Thank you. Now we're at a stage where we can ask for questions. We've got the Q&A box. Please do have a think about some of the questions you'd like to pose to our panelists, and just to get a conversation going, both about the digital good, but also about the opportunity that Helen has flagged. Just waiting for a number of questions to come through, and so I might get started with one of my own and ask Helen, obviously as director of this network, it would be really good to have your thoughts on this, on your vision for this network. So where do you imagine this network going? What do you think good looks like, and how can a range of the actors joining the call support you in that vision?
Thank you, Rima. That's the $4 million question. I guess one way of framing that question is, where do we want to be in 5 years' time? I think we're quite clear about that. We want there to be more advanced understanding of what a good digital society would look like and the mechanisms for getting there. So we're very cautious to say, you know, it's not all going to be good in 5 years' time, right? Because we recognize the multiple barriers and the multiple challenges, but we'll have a better understanding of what good looks like, especially when taking into account equity, sustainability and resilience, and the path to getting there. And we hope to have some suggestions, some kind of concrete kind of framework for how to get there. One thing we haven't talked about much today is that we intend to produce a digital good index, which we intend to be used to evaluate technological innovations against notions of the digital good. Again, you know, sounds deceptively simple, but we know this is complex, this is challenging. There's quite a lot of guidelines, different aspects of digital society being developed at the moment. But for us, it's sort of a challenge to ourselves. Can we come up with a set of indicators of the digital good that would be broadly useful? And we hope that any research that we do in our core team and the research that we fund and the other activities that we fund will produce findings that feed into our ability to produce a digital good network, to come up with kind of markers or characteristics of the digital good. I think I answered the thing about how can people get involved. I mentioned a couple of things. There's also internships and fellowships. We'll say more about that. But I think we've got a few questions there now, so maybe we can turn to some of those.
Yes, we've got a couple of questions about international candidates applying to the network. So Anthony Killeen has said they work in UK, US and Africa and would like to know if they can apply for this fund. And we also have someone who has asked about whether and how international candidates can apply to the network as well. So Ros, I wondered if you wanted to answer that question.
Certainly. So with the in relation to who can apply in terms of where they're based around the world, if you want to apply for the Digital Good Research Fund, the PI will need to be based at a UCRI eligible organisation. If you go on the UCRI website, you'll be able to see which of those they are. There's a long list of them. A lot of them are universities, but many of them are not. And that's sort of the baseline for who can apply as a PI. But one of the criteria that we'll be using for decision making in relation to the Digital Good Research Fund will be who is engaged in the research as part of the broader composition of a research team. And there is absolutely nothing to stop, and indeed we would encourage international applicants to be involved in projects as COIs or as other named ways, as you'll be able to see on the application fund, which is now on the website. So that's a brief answer, is that to be a PI, you'd need to be a UCRI eligible institution, and the link for information about that eligibility is on digitalgood.net. And if you are from another part of the world, then you can apply as part of a team as a COI. Is that correct, Helen and Gina?
Yes, I think possibly to help with the transcription, but for anyone who doesn't know, a PI is a principal investigator. That's the person leading the project. And a COI in UK speak is a co-investigator, that's other team members. But yeah, totally accurate. I think someone said, where can I find this on the website? So if you go to the URL that Ros mentioned, digitalgood.net, and click on the menu and click on opportunities, you can see the things that are already rolled out there.
And I wanted to come in on Lawrence Brooks's question. So Lawrence said, you mentioned social inequality. So can the digital good ever be realised without some group losing out and not experiencing good? And it's obviously a really important question that we certainly want to explore. So I'll come to Gina first and then Ros next.
Oh, I don't know if I wanted to pick that one up. That's a big question. Can we essentially have win-win situations, or are we talking about a zero-sum game? I don't know that that's a question that we're going to be able to answer in one research network in social sciences has been trying to do this. But I will say our perspective of where we're starting from in the Digital Good Network is that we want to try to improve lives for people and societies. And we are starting from the assumption that we can't do that in terms of some people winning and some people losing, right? That it is actually about increasing and building the capacity for good societies, and that involves increasing the good.
Thank you, Gina. Ros, any immediate reflections?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it comes down to a question of why do we frame everything in terms of winners and losers, and there's a kind of not unnatural, but something that's embedded in us to think about, you know, who could maximize the technology and who will lose out on it. And I wonder if the Digital Good Network is one opportunity amongst a range of activities that are going on at the moment to try and reconfigure what the sort of calculus is in how we determine the goodness of technologies. I don't believe that to have losers, you have to have winners and vice versa. And I think the entire framing leads to us in thinking about design in particular sorts of ways. And I think that's one of the really important reasons for working interdisciplinarily as well. So, for example, Dan Richards, who's a co-I and part of this, part of the management team of this network, I suspect he'd have some really interesting thoughts on whether we need to have winners and losers in relation to technologies, or whether we need really to be reframing the way we even ask that question. So I think that's really helpful and provocative beginning point, Lawrence, and I really appreciate that question, and it's something that we want to think through rather than answer immediately, and I think this 5-year opportunity is a chance to do that. Could I just come in? I see that Amna Nasir has asked a question related, Rima, to international applicants. In the first year, the summer school is not open to international applicants, and the reasons for that are multiple, but mainly because we've had to start the network relatively swiftly. In future years, it will be open to international applicants, and the exact machinations of how that works will be elaborated on the website in due course. So thanks very much for your interest.
Brilliant, thank you. We have a couple of questions about the thematic areas, so Agnes Goliath has asked about the connection between the 3 themes and the Digital Good Index, and Sanjay Sharma has asked about the framing of digital good, and as well as the questions of which to highlight. So Helen, I'm going to come to you on those. So there's one question which is about is there a connection between the 3 themes and the Digital Good Index, and then there's also a question about the thematic areas of focus and also the framing of the digital good. If you had any immediate reflections and observations on that, that'd be really helpful.
Yes, thanks very much, Rima. So I think it will happen that the Digital Good Index will address those 3 themes, because those are the 3 themes of the network, and they will inform the research that we support. So I'm not sure if it's like I would say we're planning to do it in that way, but the whole puzzle is kind of carefully curated, and the fact that those are our themes will inevitably lead into the shape that the Digital Good Index takes. I think that nice issues raised across the 2 questions about do the themes do the job of covering the good? I think that's really part of the question in that first one from Agnes. So, do they enable us to cover everything that we might want to cover when we're talking about what a good digital society looks like? And then Sanjay asks why those 3 challenges and why the digital good as opposed to something like digital justice, and whether the latter was considered too sort of specific or loaded. So in terms of the choice of challenges, they emerged from lots of conversation about what matters. So they are societal challenges. So we describe them as 3 kind of urgent and pressing societal challenges. I think they are, for numerous reasons, as especially outlined by Ros and Gina. So yeah, we sort of take a position here. We think they really matter, and we think we can't start to envisage the digital good without thinking about these 3 themes. Choosing the concept of digital good as opposed to digital justice, I wouldn't describe the latter as more specific and loaded, but I would describe the former as broader and more inclusive, and that it is likely then to get more people around the table, more actors and stakeholders around the table. Now, we recognize kind of criticisms of the kind of this co-option of good, data for good type initiatives, which some critics would argue kind of empty the politics out of digital relationships. We recognize that, but I think in part sort of inspired by the things that Rua Benjamin says, we want to reclaim that. We want to reclaim this concept of a good digital society. We also want to explore, we might be wrong, can it be inclusive? Can we get people who work with justice around the table, that work with other concepts broadly covered under the umbrella of the good. We hope to, but it is an exploration. So I don't know if Ros or Gina want to add anything to that.
I'm just conscious of time, and so we've got a question from Ros Galabo about being a principal investigator. So the UKRI website says to be principal investigator is necessary to be a permanent employee or treated as one throughout the proposed research project. And the question is a person with an open-ended indefinite contract able to apply for digital good funding in this case? So Gina, I wondered if you could come in on that.
Thank you, Rima. Yes, that is a question at the institution level. Does your institution allow you to apply as a principal investigator? We designed the Digital Good Network to be as expansive as we could to help early career researchers as much as we could. You'll see in our application form that there is a way to account for how projects are bringing early career researchers into projects for the Digital Good Research Fund. So the short answer, if you are at a UKRI institution and your institution sees that you can have PI status, you can have PI status with us. That's the pathway. There was a question about there was a question about, do you need to have a PhD in order to do that? And again, that's subsumed in that question about who can be a principal investigator. That's a question at the institution. However, you do not need to have a PhD in order to be a co-investigator in either a UKRI project or in the Digital Good. I must add a third point. We will have multiple opportunities that are beyond the research fund. So we've talked today mostly about the research fund. There's the summer school that's coming up, but there's also a fellowship program that will be more expansive as well. So please, as we have these events this week, there's one tomorrow and the following day, do come and listen and learn more about the different opportunities we have and the different things that we'll have available for different kinds of people who want to be involved.
Thank you, Gina. And Diane Beddoe has asked, how are we involving publics in the network? So Ros, over to you on that one.
Sure. So with the network, we've got a range of different organisations we're working with. So in addition to Rima, who's one of our engagement champions, we've also got other organisations involved as well, including BBC, Research and Development, and Birmingham Museums Trust, and places like Birmingham Museums Trust, where it's sort of their bread and butter to engage with publics. We will be engaging with them over the course of the activity we do as part of the network. But I think Gillian, I think was the person asking the question. One of the main things that's important to get across is that we're trying to cultivate a research network in which others are bringing ideas and activities to the party as well, if you like, so applying to do research. So if anybody on the call has got interesting ways of trying to engage publics in important research questions that latch into those bigger issues of our societal challenges and of the sort of the orientation of the Digital Good Network, then please do get in touch with those ideas through the various different activities that we're going to be facilitating as part of the network. So in brief, yes, we will be engaging with public, partly through our partners, partly through the College of Experts that will draw in different civil society groups to bring in expertise to how we govern the network. But in addition to that, we're hoping to learn from our larger set of colleagues from across and beyond the UK, who will be experts in bringing publics into conversation with their research as well. And so please do engage with the network on that count if that's something that you're interested in.
Thank you. And I've got a question from Alistair Lee about the types of methodological innovations for the digital good that you are hoping to test. So I'll come to Gina first and then to Helen on that.
I'm sorry, I was answering another question, Rima. What's the question again?
The question is, have you got any examples of the types of methodological innovations for the digital good that you are hoping to test? Conscious we have quite a few questions here. Any
Yes.
thoughts or ideas on that?
Yes, bring it on. We are in this first round incredibly interested in projects that are working in partnership with communities broadly defined. So community-based research is something we want to support in this first round of funding. Someone asked in the Q&A function if this is it, this first call is it, and this is a 5-year program, so we'll have multiple calls. We're interested, we have a methodology coordinator in Scott Hale from Oxford. So we're also interested in computational approaches and large scale data approaches. The research represented on this call is one particular strand of social research, but we hope to do across the range of socio-behavioral methods. So please do be thinking about those innovative small pilot project style grants for this size that could really help spark your own research, but also help us reimagine what the digital good could be.
Brilliant, thank you. And Helen, any particular reflections on this as well? And in particular questions, there've been a few other questions about, multilingual approaches, arts, cultural approaches. It'd be really good to have your take on this too.
Yeah, just to follow on methods, I think the other example comes from our colleague Dan Richards, who's in our core team, who's at the University of Lancaster. He's works across design and computer science. He uses a method that he calls prototyping to produce provocative prototypes of digital technologies to address societal problems. But actually, I would have given the example of Scott's work as Gina did, and Dan's work as I just have. But I would also like to add that please bring some methodological innovations that we can't yet imagine, that you know about and we don't know about. We really hope to be surprised by the things that people bring to the network that are outside the remit of what we know. The question about involving cultural organisations, I think Ros partly addressed by talking about the really important role that Birmingham Museums Trust is playing as a kind of core member of the team running the network. I'd also flag here as well the Sandpit event on the 27th of March intends to kind of enable people to get together. So maybe you're from a small local cultural organisation and you're not a UCRI eligible organisation to lead an application, but you could join a team of people who are and be in a team that submits an application here. So we are, trying hard to enable those connections by running things like the Sandpit event. And also, yeah, as Gina said, this is the first of 5 years, so it's the first of 4 calls. I think we have the time to finish them all if we ran 5. Someone asked about internships and fellowships. They'll be launched in September. The call for those, I think, is that right, Ros? Will be launched in September. So sort of staggered launch of the different opportunities. So I think I covered a bunch of things there, Reem. I don't know.
Absolutely, that's really great. I'll move to my last set of questions for Gina, which relates to academic status and eligibility. So a couple of you have asked, can you apply if you don't have a PhD? And a couple of you have asked, can you apply if you do have a PhD? So Gina, could you engage with that?
Yes, so for the research fund, which we're talking about here, that is a grant between 20 and 50,000 pounds that will need to be sponsored by a UKRI institution. Some of you asked, what's an institution? Short answer, does the organization get funding from UK Research and Innovation? There's a formal definition, we won't go in here, but suffice to say, universities in the UK are in that scope and some other organizations. The PI status has a UKRI definition, and there's a definition in the institutions. So the grants for those have to be housed there. But you can be involved in these projects if you don't have a PhD, and you can be involved in the projects as co-Is and as community partners and in other ways. One thing to note, someone asked about PhD funding. Those are not available through these projects as a PI. So if you were looking for your own funding as the research fund wouldn't, almost certainly you can't write your own proposal for PhD funding as a Digital Good Network research fund application because of that PI status. I know this is a little complicated. There'll be lots of us able to answer questions. We're very excited for the enthusiasm on this call today, and hopefully you can have lots of ways to get involved with the network.
Brilliant, thank you. Sadly, that's all we've got time for in terms of questions. We will aim to share more around links, specific answers to some of the questions around academic status and so on in writing after this conversation. I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone for your interest and your engagement. We have a range of upcoming events, so obviously over the next couple of days we've got more opportunities to find out more. So for instance, you can join our call tomorrow to find out about our funding opportunity and what are we looking for. So the conversation will continue. And also on Thursday, an opportunity to engage in Q&A with some successful early career applicants. I wanted to say a massive thank you to our speakers, to Helen, Gina, and Shiraz for all their contributions, but also their hard work in getting this network off the ground. And I want to say a big thank you to you for your participation. It's been tremendous to see, that we have the engagement from over 200 people, and it's been tremendous to see the range of backgrounds that you all come from, and we're really, really keen to work with you on this going forward. So a huge thank you. It's not the end of the conversation, and we will be following up very shortly. Take care.
Thank you, Rima. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.